Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. My name is Gerline, and I'm here with my colleagues Emily, and Thomas, and we are here from Thai Center for Immigrant Research, and we are presenting our community-based project called Voices in the Art, or VIA for short, and how it can be used as a best practice when understanding and working with newcomer 2S LGBTQIA plus youth. We would also like to acknowledge that VIA is funded by Women and Gender Equality Canada.
So I want to just begin with a land acknowledgement to recognize where much of this project has taken place and where most of us are presenting from today. So the Immigrant Education Society, or TIES, is located on the ancestral and traditional territory of the Blackfoot Nations of the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, the Ayithka Nakota Wiskatabi First Nations, comprised of the Chiniki, Bears Paw, and Goodstoney First Nations, and the Tsuut'ina First Nation. The city of Calgary is also homeland to the historic Northwest Métis and to the Otipemisiwak Métis government, Métis Nation Battle River Territory, Nose Hill Métis District 5, and Elbow Métis District 6.
So here's a brief overview of our webinar. First, we'll give you an introduction to the Thai Center for Immigrant Research and the Voices in Art project. Then we will discuss intervention through research as a helpful tool and as a best practice. We'll also be covering some participant experiences through their interview answers as well as art pieces. And then finally, we'll cover best practices and recommendations of what we can do as service providers and even members of the general public to better support newcomer 2S LGBTQIA plus youth. And we'll also have some fun interactive case studies to help practice our skills.
So the Immigrant Education Society, also known as TIES, is a not-for-profit that's based in Calgary, Alberta, and has been serving low-income Calgarians as well as newcomers since 1988. TIES has provided essential services such as English language support, employment assistance, mental health programs and counseling, settlement assistance, as well as specialized programs for youth and research. We operate in the Center for Immigrant Research, which falls under the 5 key pillars of services and the programs that TIES provides. Our center focuses on community-based research, program development, and evaluations as well.
So here we have a quick overview of our entire research team. VIA consisted of a community academic partnership between the University of British Columbia, University of Michigan, and TIES. This partnership allowed us to combine the expertise of our academic partners and TIES as an immigrant serving organization.
So VIA was an intervention through research project which ran from September 2023 to March 2026 and explored the experiences of newcomer 2S LGBTQIA plus youth ages 14 to 24 years old using arts-based engagement ethnography. VIA has since received additional funding to continue its work for the 2026 and 2027 fiscal year, and we will be delivering VIA-informed arts-based workshops for newcomer 2S LGBTQIA plus youth. So the research aim of VIA was to gain a deeper insight into experiences of newcomer queer youth, and we followed on 4 key areas. We were interested in exploring participants' intersecting identities, so those different identities that make up who you are, gender, age, race, integration into Canadian society, the newcomer experience, social lives and relationships, and experiences with gender-based violence. This population is more vulnerable to experiencing gender-based violence, and there is a lack of research and services tailored to their unique needs here in Calgary. VIA used arts-based engagement ethnography, ABE, because we wanted to create a research process that was participant-led, flexible, and responsive to the experiences of newcomer 2S LGBTQIA plus youth. As many of you know, traditional interview methods can make it difficult to discuss complex or sensitive experiences. And ABE offered alternative pathways for participants to express themselves and give them greater agency in how they choose to share those stories. So you can see some of the core attributes of ABE on the screen. Participants received a range of art supplies, including a Fujifilm Instax camera, sketchbook, film, and other creative materials, and they were provided with a package of prompts to inspire and support their artwork. And the artwork then became a medium for expressing and discussing experiences that can be difficult to put into words. So the artwork participants created formed the basis of their interview guide, and this meant the interviews were entirely participant-led, with participants deciding which pieces to discuss and how they wanted to share their experiences. So overall, ABE encouraged creativity and engagement throughout the research process, and participants have shared overwhelmingly positive feedback about working with the art supplies, which we will share a little bit later on. And many have described the creative process as healing, a tool for self-reflection, personal growth, and an empowering way to share their stories.
Okay, so this slide outlines the steps participants in each cohort followed in this ABE intervention component of VIA. Each cohort spanned approximately 3 months with one activity scheduled per month. So first, participants began with a detailed in-person briefing session where they signed the consent form and completed a demographic survey. They also received the cultural probes or art supplies at this time. We walked through how to use the cultural probes and reviewed a set of prompts designed to help spark reflection. So, for example, a prompt our participants received was, what does belonging or community look like to you? Then participants had about a month to think and create some artwork before coming in for a one-on-one semi-structured interview. The individual interview provided participants with the opportunity to provide context and explain the reasoning behind their artwork. The next step for our participants was to join a focus group with the rest of their cohort. These groups were arranged based on age, and the focus groups were a place for participants to come together with the rest of their cohort and participate in a discussion based on emergent themes from the rest of the cohort's individual interviews. These discussions allowed participants to see if there were any similarities or differences between each other's experiences, and it also offered them a chance to build community with each other. In month 3, they had another opportunity to participate in a second focus group with others in their cohort to further discuss their experiences and continue building community. Then finally, participants had an option to showcase their artwork at an art exhibition. We had one for the first 2 cohorts and then a second for the second 2 cohorts, where participants brought close family, friends, and loved ones. This was also an opportunity for cohorts to meet one another and enhance community connection across cohorts. We will share more about these exhibitions later on in this presentation, and we have some really cool photos too. So, as we briefly mentioned already, we used intersectionality theory as a framework to guide our research, as it highlights how multiple identities, such as one's gender, sexuality, immigration status, and age, intersect to shape people's experiences, particularly those of gender-based violence, in a unique way.
So we also wanted to highlight that intersectionality can also be used as a framework for best practices by practitioners. For instance, considering multiple social identities and contexts for a person is a best practice we can use for understanding our clients. An example of this could be, think of a Black immigrant lesbian woman having a very different experience than a white lesbian woman. Intersectionality also informs us about the type of unique care and support we can provide for clients. So things such as access to resources, cultural considerations, and gender-based violence supports can differ from client to client. So in order to participate in VIA, individuals had to meet a few key eligibility criteria. First, participants must be currently residing in Calgary, Alberta, be between the ages of 14 to 24, have sufficient English language proficiency to explore their experiences in English, identify as 2SLGBTQIA+, or are exploring their gender identity and or sexual orientation, and arrived in Canada within the last 10 years.
So here's a brief overview of the VIA participants and their demographics. So most are participants identified as bisexual, with queer being the second most identified. It's also important to note that many of our participants identified with multiple sexual orientations. In terms of gender identity, most participants identified as women, with the second most being non-binary. Likewise, many participants identified with multiple gender identities. Most participants also identified from being Asia, with the second most being from South America. In addition, participants spent about an average of 4.1 years in Canada, and participants were an average age of 21.7 years old.
So for this next section, we will be focusing on how intervention through research can be used as a best practice for practitioners when engaging with newcomer queer youth. So part of VIA's success has hinged on its approach to intervention through research, and this allowed us not only to explore the experiences of our participants, but also conduct an intervention within the research project itself. So this model demonstrates how participants can gain tangible benefits from research beyond simply contributing data. So as part of the Intervention Through Research initiative, several key elements helped ensure best practices in participant engagement and care. So firstly, we gave participants autonomy to explore and share their experiences as newcomer queer youth, centering their voices throughout the process. In addition to via being participant-led, we prioritize participant protection through research ethics, ensuring confidentiality of participants and minimizing potential harm. Finally, tying back to the intervention piece, using art as a medium provided a creative space for participants to express and reflect on their experiences, offering deeper insight into their lived realities and allowing them to explore their experiences and identities themselves.
So to emphasize the benefits of intervention through research, especially as a best practice, here are some quotes from participants when we asked them, what was it like participating in VIA? I'll read a few of them out. So this one on the top left says, it allowed me to explore my own identity and gave me the chance to practice art more. And another one said, finding community and sharing common experiences helps you feel like you're not alone in your very niche struggle. With these in mind, let's move on to more specific examples of ABE and the participant-led process of VIA. So here's a photo of some of the core items of our art supplies. So you see a Fujifilm Instax camera. We also had a journal, stationery, film, and a map of Calgary and the world. Participants also had the choice to select from other art supplies that were available during the briefing session. And most of the time, we were even able to accommodate specific requests for art supplies as well, which was really neat. So the following slides will explore some examples of ABE in practice and how the interview process was participant-led and inspired by the artwork that participants chose to share with us.
So let's take a look at our first theme, the newcomer experience, particularly about isolation that was felt by this participant. In this case, the interviewer inquires about the participant's piece, which includes elements of a red string that you can see over here, and then also some cigarettes. And this is what the participant responded with. I think like this piece is more representative of when I came here. It was 3 months before the pandemic. I was in isolation for a long time. It's not having access to community at 18 years old, not knowing how to build community, how to reach for that in a place where I didn't know how to navigate. Whenever I went for smoke breaks, so socialization breaks, there was always cigarettes attached to it. That made me really attached to smoking. It's not just the nicotine and the being addicted to it, but it was also the only part of socialization that I got when I was out there fighting for community. So I resonate with newcomers who become addicted to cigarettes, become addicted to certain things because it is your only access to feeling like you are okay in this space, you belong in this space. For this participant, their art piece displayed a vast Canadian landscapes. When probed about their art piece by the interviewer, the participant explained, just very much like typical Canadian lifestyle. When I first got here, it was something that I really kind of like rejected just because I was like missing this African country. And then I'm here. I'm not really integrating well with the lifestyle. So I would like not want to, I don't want to go to the mountains ever going to the weekend and I'm staying at home. But now it's kind of really turned into my safe space. Like I'm going out on hikes because it's sort of transformed as something that I really hated as being a symbol of being Canadian. But I've been able to adapt and make it fit for me rather than make myself fit for it.
So the next theme that we're going to focus on is navigating intersecting identities. And for this participant specifically, they submitted a poem, and you're welcome to read the poem on the screen here. But to summarize, this poem talked about existing between two worlds. In their current environment, they expressed fear of not knowing who they were today. And they also talked about their identity as an immigrant and as a traveler between two versions of themselves. When the interviewer inquired further about their experiences they were referring to in the poem, they shared that they understood who they were back home and the social expectations of society back home. In Canada, that experience was different, and they realized it was a learning experience having to adapt to a new and a different society. But this participant also felt that they could now be themselves. However, they also experienced a lot of questioning about their cultural identity. For this participant, they wanted to portray their experiences in the form of a board game. When the interviewer asked how this piece reflected their identities, they shared, I wanted the board to look like Monopoly. When we came here, you forget about like your queerness or the fact that you're LGBT. You focus so much on the immigration process, and that includes financial and emotional energy and decisions. So I thought about Monopoly for that reason. The Monopoly board represented the gamble or the roll of the dice with the decisions that had to be made regarding settlement, which meant the queer experience was not at the forefront.
Our next theme is exploring relationships. And for this illustration, the participant discussed their gender expression in relation to their mother. They discussed their complex relationship with the mother who raised them and fostered their love for English, while also expressing homophobic and transphobic beliefs that have deeply affected their relationship. The participant shared, it felt very complex because I love my mother. That's my mother, you know? And that's the woman that raised me. She told me about English, and that's how I fell in love with English. And that's why I took it in high school because of her. But at the other end, I feel very strange because I vowed when I went here that I will never look like my mother. Because even though my mom is like one of the best people ever that I love, she is still very homophobic and transphobic. She hates the whole idea of the LGBTQIA plus concept for the sake of faith. Another participant used a collage of images to showcase their involvement in many queer-led events, including Calgary Pride. When asked about their decision to be involved in their engagement, they said, so 2022, I wasn't out. I'm still not out to my parents and sibling. But I started coming out to close friends and people I knew. And that was the first year I was brave enough to go for Calgary Pride because I didn't know where to start to build community. You just have to go find them. Like Calgary Pride was kind of the first organization I became involved with.
So our last theme will be covering gender-based violence. According to Women and Gender Equality Canada, gender-based violence describes experiences of being treated unfairly or hurt because of your gender, gender expression, gender identity, or perceived gender. Gender-based violence can be physical, emotional, verbal, systemic, or digital. And in this art piece, we see a participant's depiction of gender-based violence with public transit as the backdrop. When asked about the phone or X-ray component of their piece, the participant said, I chose to have a phone because back in my country, a lot of people used to take pictures of me, like many times. And I was very sure they were taking pictures because like the flash would go off. They're not really good at hiding that. I think also somebody took a picture of me here in the C train. Whenever people were very rude to me, it was always on a C train. That's why I chose the C train as kind of like the background. Another participant also touched on their experiences of gender-based violence through their artwork, where they discussed this feeling of being surveyed. So they said, there's always eyes that I feel that's always watching me, regardless of where I am, as if I'm like, that's an awful feeling to have. And then other times where I'm just walking down the street, I can feel everybody's heads turn and just look at me as if I'm an entity from the great beyond that they've never seen before.
So in sum, the key part of the intervention through research process is that it is participant-led. As seen in the previous examples, asking participants about their artwork prompted them to explore their experiences alongside the interviewer. And in many cases, discussions began on the topic of artwork and evolved into participants sharing deeper insights about their lived experiences. We also wanted to take the time to talk more about the art exhibition component of our project.
So participants had the option to present their artwork at an art exhibit where community members, friends, family members were invited. We held two art exhibitions at the University of Calgary, one exhibit at the University of Calgary and the other one at Calgary City Hall. In total, we had nearly 200 attendees across these exhibits. The art exhibitions played a powerful role in raising awareness about gender-based violence among newcomer 2SLGBTQIA+ youth by engaging the broader public with creative expressions shared by participants. It also provided a platform for youth to share their experiences that are often minimized or overlooked, helping both participants and audiences recognize the diverse ways that gender-based violence manifests. The exhibitions also fostered community building, creating safe spaces where youth could connect and see their identities reflected and feel validated. Here are just some more photos about our different art exhibitions that we've had, and again, supporting those community building efforts and as well as raising awareness.
So our last section of the webinar is aimed to share recommendations and best practices for practitioners on how to support newcomer 2SLGBTQIA+ youth. So as service providers and allies, it is important to create space for the unique experiences that clients, family, and friends, and even strangers may bring. So one of the recommendations we have is approaching people and their experiences with an open mind can be very helpful for building trust and fostering understanding. Making assumptions can be limiting and harmful as it risks overlooking their individuality. And as mentioned earlier, using intersectionality as a framework can help us better understand the experiences of the people in front of us. However, again, we want to keep in mind that people's intersecting identities do not define who they are as people. Again, this can be reductive and unhelpful when building a connection with a person. Again, as the text on the slide states, people are not defined by their identities alone. We also want to be thoughtful about the type of questions we are asking folks and prepping clients for potential triggering questions before a session starts. So, for example, as service providers, consider whether a question you are asking is necessary. For instance, the gender of your client may not be a necessary detail that is needed to continue with a session. If you do have to ask a potentially triggering or sensitive question, provide an explanation as to why you may be asking such a question. And this allows clients to feel informed, prepared, and supported, and increases their sense of safety and autonomy in that situation. And it helps to continue building trust and transparency and respect with your client as well.
Okay, so our next general best practice to consider is utilizing open-ended questions and allowing non-committal or inconclusive answers, because they can also be helpful when working with newcomer to us LGBTQIA+ youth. So for instance, are you a woman or a man forces people to pick between a binary set of choices, and they may not necessarily identify as either. What gender do you identify with gives clients more of a say in how they want to identify themselves and doesn't restrict them to binary understandings of gender. In addition, non-committal and inconclusive answers like "I don't know" or "being unsure" can alleviate the pressure for clients to have to share such information in an uncomfortable setting and accommodate those who are questioning or exploring their identities. We also do want to emphasize some best practices on pronouns. So firstly, introducing yourself with your own pronouns can be helpful, and it also provides the other person with the opportunity to share theirs as well. So in addition, using gender neutral language can be helpful in reducing assumptions that we are making about folks. But we do, however, want to point out the language that is used to describe pronouns as a preference. It is generally well known that people's pronouns are not merely preferences, but we must consider that the person you are speaking to might not have any preferred pronouns, since pronouns may not exist in their language as the same way that they do in English. So also considering some visible markers of allyship. As service providers, it's another important consideration. So having a diverse and representative team of service providers and clientele, including pride flags and pronoun pins, even adding pronouns to your email signature, can be helpful indicators to clients. We do want to emphasize that visible markers of allyship are something to consider at all times, and they're not something that is to be done during Pride Month alone. So with all of these best practices in mind that we've shared so far, we want to try to practice them. So we have a Menti code on the screen, and I'll share a link in the chat shortly, but we want you to think about appropriate ways that you would ask for someone's pronouns. Hey, give you some more people a chance to type some things in. But I see the first example on the screen already. This one says, "Hi, my name is blank. I use blank blank pronouns. What are your name and pronouns?" That's great. Oh, I would offer my pronouns first and then ask theirs. Great. Yes, just asking, what are your pronouns? Straightforward. Use mine first and then ask what are their pronouns. Yes, exactly. What do you prefer to go by? Good. Being broad and open-ended. Yes. give everyone just a few more seconds to finish typing everything up. I know it can take some time. Oh, I go by she, her pronouns. How about you? Okay, great. Yes. You have like maybe 10 more seconds. Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing, everyone. Oh, one more. Hi, my name is blank. I identify as, or my pronouns are. Would you like to share yours? It's also all right if you do not. I like that addition at the end. Thank you. Right, so I think the answers might be slowing down a little bit, so we can transition back into continuing with our presentation.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily, for facilitating that. And thank you, everyone, for participating. So, as service providers, critical and continued reflection are important in improving your care to clients. So, using intersectionality, cultural responsiveness, cultural humility, and trauma-informed care can help ensure your practice remains inclusive, respectful, and responsive to each client's lived experience. Addressing anti-2S LGBTQIA plus hate is also important to do with clients and within your organizations as well. So whether we choose to do a call-in or a call-out approach, or find ways to promote and foster safe and inclusive spaces, these are some ways that can help. Finally, it's essential to acknowledge other ways of knowing, especially considering newcomer populations. Other ways of gender and gender expressions are valid, and it's important to keep in mind that some clients may identify as queer outside of the Western understandings of queerness. We also want to acknowledge that mistakes happen all the time, and if they do happen, then what can we do?
So it's okay that mistakes happen. Everyone has definitely made some mistakes in life, and in fact, they are a normal process of, learning. So there are three things that we can do when a mistake does happen. So acknowledging the mistake, apologizing for the mistake, and moving on from the mistake as well. And this doesn't have to be exactly in the order that's shown on the screen. I think as long as you have, those three components, it really does go a long way to kind of demonstrate your humility with a client when you do make a mistake. So again, an example of this would be like, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I'm sorry for that, and I will ensure that it will not happen again, and kind of moving on from that.
Okay, so it's time for another skill practice activity. So, considering best practices we've discussed so far, how would you correct a mistake? So maybe misgendering, accidentally making assumptions about somebody's identity, experiences. We can think both in terms of gender and sexuality, but also maybe making assumptions about someone's cultural experience, for example, as well. So the information that we use to join the Menti is the same. The link in the chat should still work, and it's also available on the screen again. Put the full question in the chat as well. Oops, I apologize for that. Yes, perfect. Just a quick little apology, right? We're not making the whole thing about us by going on and on about how bad we feel about things. Perfect. Yep, sorry about that. Nice and quick. My apologies. I'll make sure that never happens again. Perfect. Thanks for correcting me. I like that one too. I didn't mean to. I appreciate you telling me. I like that one. That one's good too. You have so many good answers coming in. Thank you, guys. Sorry. Yeah. Just a quick sorry. Sometimes that's all we need, right? I take this as a learning moment. Thank you. That one, I like that one too. All of these are so good. We'll give everyone maybe 10 more seconds, finish up typing. I apologize for assuming. Thank you for the learning. Yes. All right. I think it's been about 10 seconds. So thank you all for your responses. I really appreciate it.
Great, thank you everyone. We're not done with the Menti just yet. So with the best practice again that we've just talked about, we're going to try and practice them, but we're going to have some case studies to use as examples. So again, please scan the QR code to take part, and it's the same link again as Emily has put into the chat. Okay, so our first case study. Can we have the next slide? Perfect. Thank you so much. So the same QR code is on this screen as well if you missed the previous one. So yeah, this is our first case study, which we have as an example, and I will read it out loud. Feel free to read along as well. And thank you, Emily, as well for putting it into the chat. Farhang is a 24-year-old non-binary person who moved to Canada 2 years ago from Iran. Farhang has disclosed to you that they feel uncomfortable and unsafe at their new job. Their co-workers constantly misgender them, use the wrong pronouns, and make racist jokes and microaggressions at their expense. Now, Farhang has expressed their anxiety over bringing up their concerns to management, citing that they are worried about potentially getting fired or sent home for causing a disruption. They tell you that they are unable to afford getting fired since they need to make rent and are trying to qualify for permanent residency. So this was a little bit long. We'll give you some time to think about your response. We'd love to hear, yeah, like what would your recommendations be for Hung, or what ideas would you have, or how to support for Hung, and if there's anything, perhaps you've dealt with something very, very similar as well in your work, if that could also be a good example here as well. So yeah, what are some important considerations to make, and how can we all best support Farhang? Yeah, so we have settlement resources available to provide more information about permanent residency consideration. That's a great one. Absolutely. The more resources and more information we can provide can be really reassuring. Seek access to human rights groups. Absolutely. And that ties in quite nicely with, that piece about resources and having information that we can perhaps provide. Yeah, utilizing our HR departments. They are there to support us as an employees, and perhaps familiarizing Farhang with that process could be very, very helpful. Consider and acknowledge their lived experience and hardship they're going through. Ask open-ended questions about how it's impacting them. That's wonderful, allowing them to continue to share their stories and experiences. Oh, sorry, that surprised me there, coming in so fast. Yeah, to share their stories. Maybe if the job is unionized, it can be helpful to reach out to the union. Absolutely. Again, they are there to support employees. Recognizing that it's totally fair for them to not want to bring up their concerns. Yeah, absolutely. That's very validating as well to hear that. Seeing if anyone else has similar experiences. I think definitely reaching out to friends or other employees or co-workers could also be very, very supportive. Listening without judgment, validating feelings, asking what they need the most help with at this moment. That's a great one as well. Finding supportive colleagues. These have all been great so far. Thank you. There's some helpful online communities that can offer and share the unique intersectional experience. Yeah, again, I think we're seeing that theme of like connecting Farhang to community. I'll give you guys a few more moments to share your last responses. These have all been great so far. Thank you. Still a few more moments if anyone wants to share some last few thoughts or anything new that's come up since we've been discussing. Okay, thank you so much everyone for participating. Don't worry if you didn't participate in this one. We have another case study coming up, and which will be led by Thomas.
Thanks, Caroline. So it should be the same link as before. And you can just stay on the website if you've already have it open. So this is case study number 2. I'll read it out loud as well. And Emily will also drop this in the chat. Thank you. So Kate is a counselor at a not-for-profit supporting transgender and gender diverse clients with identity exploration and gender affirming care decisions. Yvonne, a 20-year-old trans masculine client who immigrated from India 2 years ago, has attended 2 prior sessions and decided to pursue medical transition. In the 3rd session, Kate shifts to exploring Yvonne's social support, especially family. Yvonne shares that his family does not know about his gender identity. Kate responds, I know what it's like to be closeted with your family. It can be really scary, especially when they come from a background like yours. And later adds, considering how these personal things aren't talked about in your family, it's understandable you don't want to come out to them. And many of my clients have felt the way you felt and found that coming out to their loved ones was impactful. I'm wondering if that's something you would find helpful. Yvonne gently disagrees with the framing, says he hasn't thought about coming out, and redirects the conversation to medical transition logistics, which Kate supports with resource navigation. How can we improve the care Yvonne receives? So this is a pretty lengthy one as well. So folks, feel free to take your time to read over it. It's also in the chat. And shortly after, Emily will be sharing the screen for the mentee. And I'd love to hear your responses to them. Awesome. Thank you, Emily. So we have the first response over here. Kate should have been more open instead of making harmful assumptions. Yeah, totally. I think it's important you have note of those assumptions that Kate made. I'm curious too if folks have any assumptions in mind that they've identified and would like to bring that up in the response. Over here it says don't assume things as much. Just because someone hasn't come out to their family doesn't mean the family is unaccepting. Yeah, that's such a big, 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 important point. This is something we hear quite often across our participants too, is this pressure to come out, especially in like Western society. And it doesn't necessarily apply to every cultural context. Folks are content with being who they are without disclosing that to others. So thank you for raising that. Yeah, that's a really big piece. I think that's a parallel to that second point as well, is assuming that coming out is necessary to well-being. Um, it's such a tricky topic because I think a lot of the Western research in health sciences and in healthcare emphasizes on the experiences of coming out, but like this person mentioned, it's not necessarily a vital thing for well-being. They'd assume the client's experiences were, yeah, exactly, were the same as the others she has heard about. Um, so it's a kind of a generalization that because this client, Yvonne, is transmasculine and struggles with disclosing their sexual identity, that's a shared experience with all of Kate's previous experiences, which isn't the case. Ensure they feel supported, perhaps exploring their support network or introducing a community. 100%. I think this is similar to the case that Gillian presented and this answer around connecting folks back to community and ensuring that they have a strong supportive network that they can lean into. Okay, great. Yeah, another one that someone had raised, another assumption, trying to lead Yvonne instead of letting Yvonne lead the convo. Yeah, that's such a good point. Kate should have started with how does not coming out to your family make you feel? This is such a great therapist answer. As someone who has a little bit of training in school, I think that question would have been more open-minded and more validating, allowing Yvonne to explore those feelings. Asking openly about community instead of assuming parents are a good support network. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's also a really great point. Support systems, yeah, similar point to the previous ones as well. Really, really great answers so far, everyone. And thank you for participating. I'll give it another, let's say, 10 seconds. I know that typing um, can be pretty physically intense with the previous case study so far, so take your time. And in the round, like maybe 5 seconds, we'll move on to the next one. It made assumptions about Yvonne's family based on his Indian background. A question could have been, how does your family fit into your support network right now, if at all? I think that's such a brilliant point. Yeah, yeah. Identifying what that familiar role is. Is it necessarily harmful, judgmental? Like that, those are some of the assumptions that Kate had made. So interrogating that. The focus was on medical care. Was it maybe a bit inappropriate to ask about coming out? Yeah, yeah. Is that even related to the intent of Yvonne coming to that session to seek out gender affirming care in the first place? Is that relevant? 100%. Okay, I think maybe we can shift gears to the second case study now. Thank you so much, folks, for sharing all your wonderful and thoughtful answers. So this third one over here, similar to the previous one, it should be in the same link. And Emily will also be sharing this in the chat so folks can take the time to read over it. So here in case study number 3, you and a colleague are chatting with a client about resource navigation for setting up a Canadian bank account. In the middle of the conversation, your colleague suddenly asks the client about their gender identity. I've been meaning to ask, but are you a boy or a girl? You look like both. The client, who looks visibly uncomfortable, laughs it off before saying they identify as non-binary. Your colleague then proceeds to ask, oh, I see. Is that something that they allow or have in the client's home country? So how can we address the colleague's behavior? And just hearing from our participants, this is a common reality that we hear from newcomer to us LGBTQIA plus folks, younger folks. So yeah, if folks can take the time to read over this case study, and maybe think of some ways that we can productively address the colleagues' behavior. And Emily will be sharing the screen shortly. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. So some answers are coming up right now, and it's a pretty similar answer for both. So probably pulling this colleague aside and explaining why that comment was not inappropriate. Yeah, it was inappropriate for sure, for sure. Leading question. Yeah, so this person is pointing out to some of the concerns around the question that the colleague asked. Because it was leading, it wasn't, it could be open-ended, which allows the client to answer. And that's a great way to practice some of the various skills that we've been mentioning, the best practices. Yeah, exactly. Why do they need to know about their gender? 100%. And this is such a common issue around this kind of unwarranted sense of curiosity that a lot of the participants share is because they might not fit the mold of what, the binary around gender exists, and people kind of become confused and have this, yeah, inappropriate curiosity. So the client is trying to get services at a bank. I'd redirect a colleague and say that asking about gender is not relevant and inappropriate. Exactly. So similar to the previous case study too, the client is there for a particular reason. So the previous one seeking gender affirming care. In this case, accessing services at a bank. The question around gender is not appropriate at all and not relevant to this. Letting them know that it's not a helpful question and it's invasive. Exactly. I think that word perfectly captures um, that feeling within this case study is that sense of invasion and intrusion. Yeah, doing inclusivity training at your organization, 100%. And this is something that we can't emphasize enough is ensuring that staff members are up to date with inclusive practices. And that comes with the questions that they raise or they shouldn't raise at all. If they wanted to ask the question to know how to refer to them, recommend different ways the colleague could ask openly in the future to be more respectful. 100%. I think curiosity is important, but there's respectful ways to go about with being curious. Addressing the colleague after the meeting and also checking in with the client, acknowledging that the questions may have been uncomfortable and reassuring that they only need to share what they are. I think this is kind of short. What they are comfortable with. I'm assuming that's probably what this person was trying to articulate. Yeah, I think I appreciate too the point around checking in with the client because as someone else had mentioned, this is an invasive question and it could be triggering and it could also maybe resurface some traumatic experiences in the past. So yeah, thank you for raising that around acknowledging that feeling. Yeah, the assumptions were also pretty racist. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Some of those underlying unconscious biases resurfacing here. I think maybe we can give it 10 more seconds before pivoting. I'm just being mindful of time. But really appreciate such insightful and thoughtful comments. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating in this. I'm gonna shift gears now. Hand it back to Emily.
Okay, so thank you so much for participating in all of our Menti activities. We hope that you were able to practice some valuable tools that maybe you guys can go forward and practice within your work as well. We also wanted to share some advice that participants had for service providers. And as Thomas already articulated a lot previously, these voices helped inform our case study examples. So Chris said, I would say don't make unfair assumptions right away. Ask before you go ahead with a cultural topic. Mian shared, giving like newcomer youth the space to kind of figure it out on their own a little bit, and then just being there in whatever way you can support them. And finally, Tala said, I would just say like involving the community into it, kind of similar on the topic of like nothing about us without us, talking to the community and involving them into the decision making, since they understand the experiences best. It's learning from each other and learning how we can do better.
We also had VIA participants give advice that they would want the general public to know, and we'll share some of them as they also might be relevant. I'll give you some time to read some of the quotes that we have here on the screen, but just to kind of summarize a little bit what they were trying to say, being respectful and respectful to their experiences. We don't know we don't know what someone's going through, and that we need to, be able to communicate, and everything is really about communication, and that we need to learn to listen and not just make assumptions. And then finally, also having patience, and that everyone is in a learning process, so make room for that kind of space for that. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Emily. And here we have some written feedback from a participant. And they shared, it's been an amazing experience. I enjoyed having convos with Gurleen, Emily, and Thomas, and I felt so safe and heard during my interviews. You showed so much support. I appreciate it deeply. And, this participant's reflection highlights again the importance of facilitators' roles in creating that safe space for participants to be vulnerable and, share those experiences. And as for key takeaways from the VIA project, VIA has highlighted the need for genuinely inclusive spaces where newcomer to us LGBTQIA+ youth can build community and connect over shared experiences. So through our focus groups and art exhibits, we work towards creating this space and encouraging participants to build their own. We had participants reach out to us to organize a community potluck, and we provided the space at Ties for participants to come together. We also saw art as a tool to explore one's identity, to share experiences with others, both through interviews and through the art exhibitions, to continue building those community connections and to overall enhance our understanding of such unique experiences.
So our final set of participant quotes is their advice for other newcomer 2SLGBTQIA+ youth. And we want to share these voices with you so that you might also share these voices with a client or a fellow community member. You can scan the QR code on the screen and save a copy of these shareable resources, but they're all also available on our website. If you want to privately message one of the facilitators, we would also be happy to email you a copy as well if you'd like. But just the main points of this is you can still find a community without forgetting where you're from, taking time to figure it out, letting things happen, accept what you're feeling because it's valid.
We also have developed some practice guides as well that contain key information and reminders for service providers. We have one for folks working in the settlement sector and the other tailored to those working in organizations that primarily serve gender and sexually diverse populations. You can scan the QR codes on the screen here to access them, but Emily will also share the link to PDFs as well. And they also will be available, they're also available on our website currently.
Right. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending our webinar. I hope you all were able to take some key takeaways from today and hopefully bring it back and integrate these best practices that were informed by our participants. So we will now be ending the recording for a short Q&A session. And as Emily's had mentioned earlier, this is the website that you can scan to access those resources. Thank you, everyone.